Hi, welcome to Old Dog New Tricks. I am Kevin from the future. This is a strange Old Dog New Tricks in that we're going to go back to the distant past. The distant past where Donald Trump was still an idiot and not the President of the United States. That's how far back we're going. But why are we going backwards? Well, if you remember the last episode, I mean, it's been a bit confusing because there's been an episode and then a bonus episode. But the episode beforehand, I went to Simply Race and I raced Michael Epps and this happened.
There you go. Oh, bad start. That was slow, that was worse than me. 6, 7. Right, 3,
oh no!
2,
This is awful!
You've gone already. I've started.
Yeah, pretty embarrassing. I got nervous.
He's coming! He's coming! He's gonna get me!
Now, apparently, nerves in racing are quite common. I spoke to my personal guru, Neal, and this is what he had to say about it.
I think you will get nervous. I bet you get nervous going on the stage.
Absolutely.
And I think nerves are healthy because they keep you sharp. I still get, I've been racing longer than I care to imagine, 25 some odd years, longer than that. And I still get nervous before I get on the grid. Not because of what's in front of me, but because I don't want to mess up.
Yeah.
And I always think, probably similar to comedy, there's a very fine line you walk between looking a genius on stage and looking an idiot. And it's exactly the same with racing. And obviously with racing, you've got a load of other factors around you with people, because especially with VW Cup or with touring cars, it's a physical environment. My very first race, I'll admit, I was so nervous, I actually led it and at Snetterton, I got onto the back straight and my right leg started to shake with nerves. And it started to shake so much, I put my right hand down onto my leg because I was looking at this 30 cars behind me, and it shook so much my foot came off the accelerator and I went from 1st to 10th. That is something I've never done since. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
It occurred to me shortly afterwards that nerves to me aren't that uncommon. I'm a stand-up comedian. That's my job, and I've had to deal with nerves before. When I started out as a comedian, I was nervous for days before the actual gig. But now I'll be nervous for a fraction of the time. And the only reason that has now happened is through repetition. Just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And you learn the risks, you learn from your mistakes, and when things go a bit wonky, it doesn't put you off so much. So my plan was to try and do the same thing with the scholarship. But I can't get in a car and drive around Brands Hatch from now until the scholarship. At the same time, I can't go to Milton Keynes every day and have the pleasure of riding around with Michael Epps. But fortunately for me, there are plenty of sims that you can have at home. So my plan was simple. Buy a simulator that I can use on my computer at home that's got Brands Hatch Indy circuit on it, get a car as close to a Golf as possible, and just race around with other people until the nerves subside. Then when I'm getting chased, I don't freak out and crash the car. Piece of cake. I wish it was that simple. Getting a sim on your computer, relatively straightforward. Finding one that works for you, not so easy. I will tell you now, this has been the most expensive episode that I have produced. So expensive it is in fact that I have put a little counter to the side of the screen so we can keep a tally on how much money it's cost. It also contains the most swearing. The two things are probably linked. That's why I'm talking to you for the future really, is because I want to prevent you from making some of the mistakes that I made along the way. This is essentially an idiot's guide to sim racing. And I'm that idiot. So, first stop on the sim racing merry-go-round, iRacing. Now, iRacing is a really popular sim. It's got loads of loyal fans. I think it's got about 50 cars, 70 tracks. It's got endorsements from racing drivers in all kinds of formula. But hey, you pay those any money. And they'll say they like it. But hey, you pay one of those guys enough money, they'll tell you Hitler was a visionary. But that aside, it is a very, very popular game.
No, it's a training tool for NASCAR drivers.
So my first impression of iRacing was this was a bargain. I got the game and a 3-month subscription for just $5, which worked out as £3.57, which was amazing. and I also bought the Brands Hatch Indy circuit, which is a little bit more expensive. It's $14.95. All of the tracks are about $14.95, and at the exchange rate at the time, that cost me £10.66. Ping! But very quickly for me, the cracks started to appear. For example, their user interface, their front page. It is the most noisy, badly designed cacophony of different colours, fonts and misinformation I've ever seen. It's like the web designer chewed down a bucket full of Skittles, a bucket full of peanut M&Ms and a bucket full of Smarties, puked on the screen, looked at the mess while he wiped his mouth and went, "Do you know what, I think that looks quite pretty, I think we'll go with it." It's the most confusing site. I'm pretty sure that this site should come with a warning for epileptics, because if you look at it long enough, you're bound to have a fit. Drove me mad. And some of the tabs link to other tabs, and they're sort of, some of them pages double up. It's confusing. It's just confusing. In a world where we're kind of used to the sort of minimalist Apple approach to things, just like simple aesthetics, blah, blah, blah. You look at this, it's going, ah! It's just a bit much. But epileptic fit-inducing graphics aside, there was a bigger problem. I was awful, like really, really bad. And I was starting to annoy people. And initially I did have some guilt about this, but as I got further into the game, annoying people started to become more fun, because what you'll find on iRacing more than any other sim is the level of typed and verbal abuse is insane. If you have any kind of innocence, if you're watching this and you're under the age of, I'd say 13 maybe, don't go on iRacing. There are plenty of other places in your life, probably at the moment, probably at school, probably on Facebook, all kinds of places you could probably get abuse. Don't add iRacing to that list.
Stay the f*** out of the way.
It's an awful place. I'm a comedian, right? I say rude things on stage, but there is a person at the door that says, "You're not old enough to come in here and listen to this." I've had some horrible things said to me while I've been on stage. We all have. But when I'm going for a nice drive around a circuit, it's not what I want to hear. And I was getting a lot of abuse because I was bad at the game. But everyone should be bad at the game when they start. We're all rookies. Then another problem occurred. I was playing the game with this. This is a Logitech M185 wireless mouse, USB. Yep. Not something that even I would consider a tool of the trade. Never in history has a professional driver stepped into one of their sims and said, "Yeah, I'm really enjoying the steering wheel, the motion and the wind that you're blowing in my face, but is there any chance we can turn all of that off and I use a crap mouse to see if I can improve my sector times?" I came to the stark realisation, if I'm serious about using a sim to help me with the scholarship, I'm going to need to use a steering wheel and pedals. And they aren't cheap. But because I'm a sucker for a gadget, I went out to the shops and I spent £230 on a steering wheel. Okay, so I got the wheel, and now, as is traditional, I'm supposed to unbox it. I've no idea what the appeal of these videos is, but what I have noticed is they're all filmed in bedrooms and you're very unlikely to see the person's face. I'm assuming this is because they still live at home with their parents and they don't want to show their face as they're rightfully embarrassed about it. So, let's do it. In a box with a picture of a Logitech G920 steering wheel and pedals, we have some pedals and a Logitech G920 steering wheel. In this box with a picture of a gear stick, we have, yes, you've guessed it, a pineapple. No, my mistake, it's a f***ing gear stick. Of course it's a f***ing gear stick. Utterly pointless. So I plugged it in and excitedly prepared for the first test drive. Nothing. Still nothing. Finally got it to work and early indications were good. So back in iRacing I splashed out, because although you do get some cars and some tracks, none of the cars I was given were front wheel drive. Now the Golf that I'm hoping to drive in the scholarship is front wheel drive. I can't really remember how much it cost. All I remember is it was done in dollars, and they don't really count. They're like monopoly money. All I've got to do is go around the board one more time, and as long as I don't get caught in jail, I get $200 back and we're away. Bosh. Despite my little spending spree, there was still a problem. I hadn't had a chance to race any of these cars around Brands Hatch Indy. And that's why I bought this thing in the first place, to race around Brands Hatch Indy against other people, to get a bit more experience of a live race. You see, the problem is the game just doesn't work like that. You can't buy a car, buy the track, turn up and race other like-minded individuals. There are 43 different race series. Each series has a 12-week season, and each week of that season the tracks change. Then at the end of the season there's something called the 13th week challenge, where all of the series league tables are reset. A new set of 12 tracks are chosen for the next season. So in order to drive a Jetta around Brands Hatch, I would have to wait until the powers that be decide that Brands Hatch Indy is part of the season. And in all the time I played it, it never happened. In fact, I didn't see it appear in any series. So in a bid to get at least some time on an English circuit in a front-wheel drive car, I bought Alton Park, Silverstone and Donington in the hope that they would come up and I could drive my Kia Optima around, and even if they didn't, at least I'd get a bit of practice around those tracks. But in order to drive that Kia, I needed a different licence. You see, iRacing has 6 different licences, from rookie to D to C to B to A, all the way up to pro. I was a rookie. Now, in order to gain the next level of licence, you need to do 2 things. First, you need to complete a certain number of races during the 12-week season, which is pretty straightforward. But secondly, and more importantly, you need to have a safety rating of a certain number. This is more difficult though, because you're marked down for collisions, loss of control, off-track excursions, and that kind of thing. What it essentially means is that if you drive like your nan and actually avoid racing, you get a new licence. Despite this, I did manage to get my D licence, only to discover that when I arrived at Donington for my first Kia race, it was just me and one other car. My new problem was that even though iRacing says there are allegedly 55 to 65,000 active members, some cars, tracks and series aren't that popular. Right, I was starting to get a little miffed by now. I bought a wheel, a boatload of content, and yet I was getting no or very little entertainment from this much hallowed game. So in a last ditch attempt, I decided to buy a Skip Barber Formula 2000. It's an open wheel car and it was in quite a popular series. Sure, I had to buy a couple more tracks to participate in the series, but now I was racing in popular fields, I was getting the hang of the tracks that I was never likely to see, but at least I was finally racing. I also got offered 3 months more subscription that if I purchased ahead of time, I'd get a discount rate. So I updated it. Then they swapped everything around again. I needed to buy more circuits, and I tell you what, I just gave up. Each season meant a new purchase, and I'd had enough. Constantly being told, purchase required, update required. Then you update it, and it was just another purchase is required. But the way this game is structured is at every stage, it seems like they're just trying to extract money from you. Do you know what it reminds me of? You know those magazines where you can build a model, so the first part comes with the first bits, the second part with the second bits, etc, etc. I saw one for a DeLorean recently, a Back to the Future DeLorean. Build your own Back to the Future DeLorean! The first issue was £1.99, the second issue was £2.99, and then in small print it said the remaining 128 issues will be £8.99, and I worked it out, and that means that to build that DeLorean will cost you £1,155.70.
Great Scott!
iRacing is exactly like that. They will work out how to charge you and make money from you at every turn. So my interest waned, and then my subscription ran out. Despite by this point me spending £141.42 on cars, tracks and subscriptions, I no longer had any access to any of it. I spent all of that money and I can't even test a car. I'd understand if I wasn't allowed to race online, you know, if I wasn't allowed to meet other people. But I've paid for those tracks and circuits. I've paid for those cars, or that's what I thought. The bottom line is, you can't buy iRacing. You can hire it, but you can't buy it. You'll never own it. And it's so frustrating because it's the way so many programs seem to be going. Microsoft are doing it, Adobe are doing it, just this subscription service. So you never really, oh, you always have the most up-to-date version. I don't give a fuck, mate. I want to own the game. So in summary, iRacing is a fantastic simulator. It's so realistic, in fact, that if you continue to play it just like the real thing, you'll end up with a lot less money. Not exactly the point of a sim, but it seems to be their main aim. Separate you from your dollars. So I needed to find another sim, and quick, because I'd wasted a lot of time on iRacing and the scholarship is getting ever closer. But then I suddenly realised that when I went to Simply Race, I didn't use iRacing. I wonder if I could use their sim. And the sim that they use is rFactor 2, and luckily for me, that's a game you can buy. So I bought it. I bought it on Steam for this, and I bought a yearly subscription for this, altogether making this. Ta-da! And do you know what? rFactor 2 was an absolute nightmare. Not because of the game, because of my computer. I was playing iRacing on my laptop and I didn't encounter any problems at all. My laptop, pretty poor. But then I tried to play rFactor 2 on my laptop, not having it. The computer's just not strong enough. And I think the reason for this is rFactor 2 has a very, very complex tyre simulation process. So it requires so much of your computer brain to work out all of this complicated tyre dynamics that it just froze. I was driving around corners frame by frame. I mean, it's actually surprisingly difficult to drive around when you have to the wheel. When they move the Mars rover, they have to do it 3 days in advance, and that can be tricky because they program it. And you feel like that when you're driving rFactor on a bad computer. If I wanted to play rFactor 2, I needed a computer that was capable of playing it. Now, I did need a new computer. I do make a lot of videos. I'm going to do the scholarship. I need a sim. I need a sim now. I can't... Look, I'm not going to lie to you. There's no way to justify it. I went to the shops, and after spending a load of money on iRacing, a load of money on a steering wheel, and a little bit of money on rFactor 2, I made those expenses look ridiculous because I spent this much on this computer. But how to describe rFactor? That's enough of my problems. Well, the beauty of rFactor is that you don't have to pay for the content. There's the content that you get with the game. If you want, you can play that. If you play on Steam, you can join the workshop, and then that'll just download any track or car or mod that is in their workshop. You get that for nothing. But there are also websites, forums, all kinds of places you can find mods. There are groups everywhere, and you get all this stuff for nothing. The handling for me is better, it seems more realistic. On iRacing, you can lose a car and think, yeah, hang on a minute. I'm no genius, but there's no way that I'd still be spinning right now. It has been called, a famous racing driver who will remain nameless, once called it ice racing, which is very, very telling. It is a great game, but there's always a but. Value for money, I think rFactor 2 is unbeatable. If it was just down to money, you'd be an absolute idiot to do anything other than buy rFactor 2. For me, there were two fundamental reasons why rFactor 2 may not appeal. But take my word for it, persevering through these glitches is much better than trying to persevere through iRacing. rFactor 2 is very complicated. You don't get any help. There's no like on-screen pop-up saying, well, why don't you try this? I see you're trying to race a DeLorean. None of this happens. So the only help you have is this guy that stands at the pit lane and waves at you. I've called him Keith, but he's not even any help. He will happily wave you out to the end of the pit lane where it's still closed, so you have to still watch for the red light or you get a penalty. And do you know what it's like? Imagine you were given the keys to every car in every garage at every racetrack in Europe. If you actually had the keys to all of these cars, you turn up at the garage and you go, well, I've got to unlock the door. How do we do that? You'd unlock the door, you'd try all the keys, the alarm would go off, then the police would arrive and you go, no, it's all right, I've got the keys, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. So they'd walk away, you eventually get in, and then you go, well, that's the car, that's the start button, but where does the fuel go? How do the gears work? So yeah, it's actually quite a complicated sim with no real in-game help. And my advice to you here would be this. If you start, as you should with, I think, most racing careers, in a go-kart, learn the fundamentals and then move up. And I tell you what has saved me more than anything else is the Clio Cup. It's a really good series to choose and race around to get a feel for the game and understand the dynamics of it a little bit. Check online, there are loads of places you can find things. I'll put in the bottom, I'll put links to all the places where I found help, and that should hopefully save you any of the grief that I encountered. The other problem is online racing. Now, it's not as simple. iRacing, you can plug it in, choose your track, and as long as you own them, you can go and race other human beings. And what I really need is human error, anger and emotion. I need to race around with those people. So it's a little difficult to find those. rFactor 2 gives you the ability to do that, but the people that you race with have to be proper enthusiasts that are willing to put a game on a server, organise a race, usually a website. It's a lot involved, so these people are the real heroes of the piece because they do this for nothing. They provide scores, they monitor, they police, and they're not employed by rFactor. They're just people like you and I that looking for a race, and they organise it and keep it going. I joined 3 groups: the World Series of Racing, Exiled Virtual Motorsports, and online touring car racing. So big shout out to these guys. I did something that as a 43-year-old man I've never done. I went online, I found an online group of people who were hanging out racing, and I made some new friends. The people at OTCR are a really good bunch of guys, and they helped me and organised a race. So I'll put links to all of them down below that I've found. And look, let's make this forum, because what I'm really aware of, now I've come to the end, there are tribes. They're 2 warring factions. They will fiercely defend their chosen sim, and I don't really want the comments to become "you're a noob, you're rubbish," because what usually happens is when somebody slags off iRacing, a section of the iRacing community will find your profile, list your races and your flaws, and tell you that you never really tried, you weren't very good. Now, I have nothing against anyone that uses iRacing. I don't hate them. I tell you what, it's not true. I really detest the people that go on iRacing to spout hate and drivel towards somebody who accidentally nudges their car. Those kind of idiots. I hate those guys. But if you've got the money to spend on iRacing and you're happy to spend that money, go for it. But I haven't, which is why I prefer rFactor, because I don't feel like I'm being ripped off. Of all the money I've spent, and I've spent a lot, as you can see, the only money I spent and feel like I wasted was the money that I spent on iRacing. What I'd like in the comments, and I realise I'm asking YouTube comments, what I'd like is them for a place to be advice, you know? So below, if you know of a decent website where people, like-minded individuals, can race around in rFactor, bang it down there. If you know a way of spending less money on iRacing, bang it down there. Or if you just want to call me a d***ing driver, bang it down there. I'll block it, but bang it down there anyway. So briefly, in summary, for me, rFactor 2 is the better value and essentially the better game. It requires more effort. The best way to describe that is this. Imagine rFactor 2 is like a wife or a loving long-term partner. The more you invest in that relationship, the more you get out, and the longer it will last. iRacing's more like a high-class escort. All the while you're paying for that service, you're the very best, the only person that really exists. But the second that you stop paying, you're out of there, pal.